out of control. That's how Oxfam is describing the state of global inequality. The gap between rich and poor has widened so much. The charity says that in 2019, the combined wealth of the world's 2,100 billionaires exceeded what the poorest 4.6 billion people have. Oxfam also says the richest 1% have more than twice the wealth of almost 90% of the global population. Its report has blamed policymakers for failing to narrow the rich-poor divide. The timing of the report is no coincidence. The same people under fire for perpetuating inequality are to discuss how to solve the crisis over 3 days in the Swiss ski resort of Davos.
On the one hand, you see the billionaires who are all assembling at Davos with their personal planes, personal jets, super rich lifestyles. This is not happening by chance. This is happening because we have created a system which is favoring the billionaires. It is lining the pockets of those billionaires and at the expense of poor and ordinary citizens.
Failure to act to reduce inequality is what Oxfam says is fueling anti-government protests across the world. Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund is sounding the alarm on the cost of social unrest. It calls it a risk to a global economic recovery.
Geopolitical risks are rising, social unrest is prevalent in many countries, and we could see a re-escalation of trade tensions. We are seeing tentative signs that global growth may be stabilizing at subdued levels. We are projecting growth to recover modestly from 2.9% in 2019 to 3.3% in 2020 and then 3.4% in 2021.
The organization praised the US and China for reaching a consensus on trade. The elimination of some tariffs and trade barriers prompted the IMF to lift China's growth forecast to 6% this year. But it kept its US growth expectations unchanged at 2%. Sustainable growth, trade tensions, and the climate crisis are set to be among the biggest topics of discussion at Davos this year. Tackling inequality is too, but organizations like Oxfam say it's high time to put words into action. Laila Humairah, TRT World.
Well, for more on Oxfam's latest report, let's speak to the NGO's Head of Policy on Inequality, Max Lawson, who joins us from Nairobi. Welcome to Money Talks, Max. Now, you found that 22 men own more wealth than Africa's 326 million women. When you put it in those terms, it really does sound alarming and grossly unjust, doesn't it? What's fueling this growing inequality?
I think many things are fueling this global inequality, but what we really want to draw attention to this year is that at the very top, you have this very small group of obscenely rich people with more money than you could spend in 1,000 lifetimes, and that most of these people are men. And then at the bottom, and as the example gives from Africa, but all over the world, the poorest women are working long hours, often for no pay, caring for the sick, caring for the elderly. And it's this work done by the poorest women in our sexist economy that's supporting the grotesque inequality that we see today.
Now, what do you propose we do to address this chasm, really, of inequality between the rich and poor?
I think the first thing to understand is inequality is not inevitable. It's a policy choice. In the last 10 years, the number of billionaires has doubled. That's no accident. That's about politicians giving them tax breaks, sorting out an economy that benefits the richest. That doesn't have to happen. We've had periods of history in the past where inequality has got a lot less, that the gap between rich and poor has shrunk. So I think that's the key message, that if governments chose to, they could really tackle this crisis and they could fix the problem of inequality.
Now, we know that the United States has the world's most billionaires. I think last count it was more than 700. Now, we're starting to see signs of pushback in that society against this gross inequality, extreme wealth. We've got presidential candidates like Bernie Sanders saying billionaires should simply not exist. Elizabeth Warren wants to introduce a wealth tax that would essentially punish them. Does it give you some comfort that these conversations are being had at such a public level in a country like America?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as you say, the billionaire boom has been biggest in America. That's where you see the most billionaires, and that's where you see grotesque levels of inequality and a very real possibility next year, sorry, later on this year, of a President Sanders or a President Warren, and they're talking about implementing punitive wealth taxes, which would seriously reduce the wealth of the super rich and reduce the number of billionaires. That's a very good thing because it doesn't make sense to have so much money in secret Swiss bank accounts of billionaires. Imagine the schools, the hospitals, the teachers, the nurses that money could pay for. So yes, it is exciting to see the real politics in America moving. And I think that reflects the anger on the streets. I think people are sick of a world that seems to constantly reward those at the top and a winner takes all economy when ordinary people are being left behind.
Now, it's no coincidence that the release of your annual report on global inequality coincides with the gathering of the world's rich and powerful in Davos. Are you finding that your message is getting through to these leaders at all?
I think the key point about Davos is this is a group of people who caused the problem in the first place, and looking to Davos for the solutions, looking to the arsonists to put out the fire is never going to work. But this is a key moment where the world is focused on extreme wealth, is focused on inequality, and the solutions to inequality will never come from Switzerland, from mountaintops. They will come from the streets. They'll come from ordinary people protesting from Chile to Lebanon to Paris, demanding a fairer world and demanding that their leaders, their politicians, listen to ordinary citizens and stop listening to plutocrats in the halls of Davos and other meetings. We need to stop this billionaire boom before it's too late.
Okay, Max Lawson in Nairobi. We'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.